All right, good. Okay, so we did this page already, but I want to start here for review. Okay, so what we were doing last class, talking about average costs and average cost curves. Okay, so this one in the diagram was average fixed cost. And the average fixed cost, your average fixed cost as a business, as your output increases, your average fixed cost will go down because you are spreading out your fixed cost over a larger and larger quantity. So the average will go down. Let's see, your average variable cost, that was the stars here. Your average variable cost, that one there. Now it does go down at the beginning, but then it goes up. So for the most part, it goes up because your variable costs will increase because of your fixed input. So remember, as a business, when you have a fixed input, your capital, your workers have to share the capital. Then the more workers there are trying to share the same capital, there'll be less capital per worker and they will become less productive. So your variable costs go up. And then the total cost is the average total cost, sorry, is the sum of both of them. Now here, at the beginning, both average fixed and average variable are going down. So of course the average total will also go down. But then at some point, like here, between here and here, the average total stays the same. Because the up of the average variable is the same as the down of the average fixed, so the net change is 0. And then over here at larger quantities, even though your average fixed cost is going down, your average variable cost is going up by more. So the net is an increase in your average total cost. Okay. And so then we had talked about last class how the decrease of the average fixed is called the spreading effect. You're spreading out your fixed costs, which is good, right? So as a business, it's helpful to produce more because it makes your fixed costs more worthwhile. But your workers have declining productivity as you try to hire more workers, so your average variable costs go up. So the average total cost will go down when you're producing a small quantity, but as you try to produce more and more, your average total cost will go up because of the diminishing returns effect to your labor. Okay, so that's everything that we did already last week. Any questions about that? Yeah.
What about the marginal cost?
Yes, yeah, so that's where we're starting today. So the marginal cost is this one. So marginal cost is going to kind of follow the similar pattern to the average variable cost, even though it's a different formula. So it's delta TC over delta Q. But remember how we talked about the fact that it's actually really delta VC because the fixed cost part of the total doesn't change. And so it will follow then a similar pattern to the average variable cost, even though it's a different formula, right? So you get different numbers, it's a different formula, but it's related to the variable cost. So what we can see here is that they would both go down at the same time, and then they would both start to increase at the same time. Okay, now, the marginal cost curve is showing us when you produce one more unit. So like if you have a pizza restaurant and you produce one more pizza, that's the cost of the extra pizza. And so it's different from your average because your average is taking your total cost for all the pizzas you're producing and then figuring out what's the average for all the pizzas that you've produced. Okay, and in this diagram on page 15, we just have the average total cost curve and the marginal cost curve. Okay, so this one here is the average total cost curve. And so notice that it's going down when the marginal cost of the extra chair is less than the average. As long as the marginal cost is underneath that, it's less than the average, it will bring the average down. But as soon as these marginal cost numbers, the cost of those extra chairs, becomes higher than the average, at that point, the average total cost starts to go up. Good. All right. All right, so in this chapter, it's a lot of curves, and you're really having to learn how to visualize, using the graphs, what happens to production costs as the producer produces more and more output, right? So all the graphs have quantity on the horizontal because you're learning about what happens to the costs as the producer produces more and more. Okay, so this is what we were just talking about then. So when the average cost curve is above the MC, so in other words, the MC is lower than the average, it'll bring the average down. So the average total cost curve decreases. But as soon as the marginal cost curve is above the ATC, then the ATC will start rising. And so we can see that over here in this diagram as well, right? So as long as the marginal costs are below the average comes down. But as soon as the marginal costs are above the average, then the average will start to go up. And it's exactly the same thing with the average variable cost for exactly the same reason, right? The marginal cost is the extra variable cost. So if the marginal cost is less than the current average, it'll bring the average down, and as soon as the marginal cost is bigger than the current average, it'll start to bring the average up. Okay, so this is the usual pattern then. We have two U-shaped curves, and then the MC curve will go up and it will cross at the bottom. Now this one has no name, but this one here, this one's called a minimum cost output. Okay, so that's called the minimum cost output, and that will be at, can't remember, so that looks like, that's at a quantity of 6 then in that example. Anyway, so that's where the MC will equal the ATC. So the next exercise is about the food truck example, and the first question, or the first two questions, are about the spreading effect and the diminishing returns effect. Okay, so spreading effect and diminishing returns effect. I will just remind you about that. So we talked about this last class. I'll just remind you about it. So the average total cost is the sum of the average fixed and average variable. The average fixed cost is a number that always goes down, while the average variable cost goes up. Right, so you've got an average fixed cost that goes down, average variable cost, it might go down at the beginning, but then it starts to go up. And then the average total is the sum of both of them. This is called the spreading effect. This is in your notes from last class. And this one is called the diminishing returns effect. And by effect, it's meaning effect on average total cost, which is important to you as a business, right? Because that affects your profit. So as you produce more and more, your fixed cost, your average fixed costs go down. And so that will make your average total go down. But then at the same time, as you try to produce more and more, your workers who are sharing that fixed cost are becoming less productive, and that makes your wage costs go up. So that's the diminishing returns effect. So then this brings your average total down, this brings your average total up. What happens here, it just depends on which change is bigger. So when the spreading effect is a bigger effect, like over here compared to here, then your average total would be going down. But then over here, when the up of the diminishing returns effect is bigger than the down of the spreading effect, that's where your average total is going to start to go up. Okay, so as you produce more and more, your average total costs go down, and then they start to go up. Okay. So the question in exercise 4 then is about the pierogi food truck example, and where are the effects stronger? And you can tell which effect is stronger just by looking at the average total. Is it going up or is it going down? Okay, so let's go back to that exercise with the average costs. We did it not yesterday, last class. That was here. There we go. Okay. So over what quantity range of pierogi servings is the spreading effect stronger than the diminishing returns effect? So the spreading effect means the down of the average fixed cost is bigger than the up of the average variable. And so the net effect is that the average total cost goes down. So where does it go down? It's going down, 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 down to here. Okay, so that would be the quantity up to 310. And then the opposite, over what quantity range of pierogi servings is the diminishing returns effect stronger, meaning your average total costs are going up, and so then that would be the other quantities, so this range here. The minimum cost output. So the minimum cost output, you look for the lowest average total cost. And when you have an example like this where there are 2 points where the average total cost is lowest, then you pick the one that is the equilibrium with the MC, right? Because the MC crosses the ATC curve at its lowest point. So the minimum cost output, even though it's the same here and here, you would pick the equilibrium point. So that's at 350. Okay, all right, and so then that will be at $5. Okay, all right, so now what we're going to talk about is that little dip in the MC and AVC curve. So we saw that in the chair example, and then you can see it in the diagram here as well, that the average variable and the marginal costs are actually going down first, and then they start to go up. Okay, so that's a little bit different than most of the diagrams that we've looked at so far where the marginal cost just goes up. This is actually more realistic. So realistically, your marginal cost and your average variable cost will go down only when the business is starting out. And so it's a small business and it's increasing its production a little bit. And then there'll be diminishing returns to the labor force. Okay, so imagine the pizza restaurant. Now imagine you just opened it and you're the only one working in it. So you have to do everything. You have to make the pizzas, you have to clean, you have to serve the customers. Are you going to be very productive? Or would you be going kind of crazy? Probably you would be going a bit crazy trying to run around and do all of those tasks yourself. And it would probably be very helpful when you can hire at least a couple people so that you're not running around the entire restaurant. And instead, you've got one person just in the kitchen cooking, and one person can just serve the customers, and one person can just do the cleaning. Right? So what would be happening there is that with the few workers, you would be able to specialize. Whereas if you were in the restaurant all by yourself, you would not be able to specialize. You would have to do everything. And so then, I'm sure you've experienced situations like that, right? It's very easy to make mistakes, right? And you forget things and you're just not very productive. But as soon as you have enough workers that you guys can specialize, then you actually become more productive because you can focus on the tasks that you're doing and not have to run around. So in reality, when you hire the first few workers in your business, productivity can actually go up because those workers can specialize. But then once you start to hire like 4, 5, 6 workers, okay, then there'll be diminishing marginal product because those workers are having to share the same equipment. Okay, so it's just at the very beginning that your workers will become more productive. And if they're more productive, that's going to mean that your costs go down, right? More productive means lower costs. Good. Okay, so the marginal product of labor actually increases then, only at very low levels of production. So just going from like 1 worker to 2 or 3 workers. Okay, so in the diagram then, where the marginal cost is going down, that is where your business is experiencing more productivity or increasing marginal product. And then when your marginal costs start to rise, that's at the point where the productivity starts to go down. So you've got decreasing marginal product. Okay. Any questions? Yeah. Marginal product? Yeah. Let's go over that. Okay. So this was page 2. So we did this one last Friday. Marginal product is when you hire 1 more worker, how much does your output increase? And because the workers are having to share the capital, which is fixed, then the more workers you have, the less capital per worker there is, and they become less productive. So each additional worker increases your output, but by a smaller and smaller amount. So the marginal product of labor goes down, and as a result, then when you measure the total product, it will increase, but at a decreasing rate. All right, so then that was the opposite of when we did cost curves, which was, where was that? That was on page 7. So page 7, we did the cost curves. And so this results in rising marginal costs because each additional worker in this example here increased output but by a smaller and smaller amount. But then when we calculated the marginal cost, we had to pay the workers the same, $2,000, and then the increase in the output, which is the denominator here, became smaller and smaller. And so as a result, the marginal costs go up. So marginal costs of production go up. And then that means that when you graph the total cost curve, it will increase at an increasing rate. Okay, so now on this page, we're going to put it all together. Okay, now I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this in pencil because I'm going to make a change. Okay, so maybe don't do it right yet. Don't do it right yet because I'm going to change it. Okay, so marginal product of labor, that's this one here, goes down. And as a result, the marginal costs go up because the delta Q is on the top for marginal, oh no, sorry. There, good thing I'm a pencil. Sorry, delta Q is on the top here and delta Q is on the bottom here, right? And so they're inversely related. This delta Q is a number that keeps getting smaller and smaller and smaller, but then because you're dividing by it over here, it results in a rising marginal cost. Okay, so then when you graph the total curves, this tells you what's happening to the slope because this is the slope. So here we have a declining slope, so total product increases at a decreasing rate, total cost increases at an increasing rate. All right, except now we just talked about a difference. What we just talked about was the fact that at low levels of production, when your workers can specialize more, they actually can become more productive. So actually at low levels of production, what we will see is rising marginal productivity until that benefit of specialization is all used up, and then we get declining marginal productivity because they have to share the capital. Now when this goes down, this goes up. So then if this goes up, this has to go down, right? They're opposite. So at this amount here, so about there, up to that point, the marginal cost would actually go down instead of up. So it'll go down until that benefit of specialization is all used up, and then it will start to rise with diminishing marginal productivity of labor. Okay, and so now the tricky part, how does that affect these curves here? So these curves, again, I'm going to erase the first part. So let's do TP first. Now, the marginal product tells us what's happening to the slope of this curve. So over here, the marginal product goes down, so this slope is becoming smaller. But if the marginal product is going up, that means the slope is getting steeper. So at first, it has to increase at an increasing rate, and then increase at a decreasing rate. All right, so it has to increase at an increasing rate and then increase at a decreasing rate. And so that where it makes that switch, this point right here, that would be that point right there. Okay, now for the cost, it'll just be the opposite. When marginal cost is rising, the total cost will rise at an increasing rate. But if the marginal cost is going down, then the total cost is rising at a decreasing rate. So it has to go up this way, and then it starts to go that way. Okay, so it's increasing at a decreasing rate, and then increasing at an increasing rate.